My son raised his hand against me in my own kitchen, and the sound of my reading glasses crunching under his boot was the only thing that broke the silence. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not call for help. Instead, the next morning, I cooked him a feast. He smiled and ate my homemade biscuits, thinking he had finally broken me. He thought my silence was submission. He had no idea that while he was buttering his toast, the man sitting in the unmarked car outside was already double-checking the warrant. My name is Evelyn Washington. I am 68 years old, and this is how I taught my ungrateful son that you never assault a woman who spent 30 years auditing the most dangerous tax cheats in Chicago. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you are watching from and subscribe to the Never Too Old channel. We are building a community of people who know that respect is not negotiable. Now back to the story. It started at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday evening in the dining room of the brownstone my late husband and I had bought 40 years ago. The air was thick enough to choke on. My son Darius sat across from me, tapping his fingers on the mahogany table, while his wife Ashley picked at her pot roast with a look of pure disdain. They had moved in 3 months ago under the pretense of house repairs, but tonight the pretense was over. Darius pushed a stack of papers toward me across the lace tablecloth. It was a loan application, a second mortgage on my paid-off home for $200,000. "Mom, you are not listening to me," Darius said, his voice rising. "Ideally, this crypto opportunity is once in a lifetime. I just need the capital. If you sign this, we double the money in 6 months. Then we pay off the house and buy our own place." I looked at the papers, then I looked at my son. I spent 3 decades as a senior auditor for the IRS. I know what a bad investment looks like, and I know what desperation looks like. Darius did not look like an investor. He looked like a man drowning. "No, Darius," I said. My voice was calm, the same tone I used to use when telling a CEO he was being audited. "I am not mortgaging my home for internet money, and I am certainly not signing anything that puts a lien on the only inheritance I have to leave to your son." Ashley let out a sharp, cruel laugh. She leaned over and whispered loudly to Darius, "See, honey, I told you. She would rather take that money to the grave than help her own flesh and blood. She is selfish, Darius. She wants to see us fail." Darius turned red. The veins in his neck bulged. He stood up so fast his chair tipped over backward. "Do not talk to my wife like that, Mom. You sit there on this pile of equity acting like a queen while we are drowning. Sign the papers." I stood up slowly. I adjusted my cardigan. "No." That was the moment the world tilted. Darius lunged across the corner of the table. He did not punch me, but he grabbed my shoulders and shoved. He shoved me hard enough that I flew back and hit the wall. My head cracked against the plaster. My reading glasses flew off my face and landed on the hardwood floor. Darius stepped forward and deliberately crushed them under his heavy boot. Jordan. My 14-year-old grandson had been eating silently in the corner. He jumped up screaming, "Dad, stop, leave Grandma alone." He tried to rush to me, but Ashley caught him. She shoved the boy back onto the sofa with a force that made him gasp. "Sit down and shut up, Jordan," she hissed. "This is grown-up business." The room went dead silent. My face throbbed. My vision was blurry without my glasses. I looked at my son. He was breathing hard, his fists clenched, waiting for me to scream or beg or cry. He wanted a reaction. He wanted me to be the weak old woman he could bully. I took a deep breath. I reached up and smoothed my hair. I looked him dead in the eye with the cold calculation of an auditor who has just found the smoking gun in a fraud case. "All right," I said softly. Darius blinked, confused. "All right, what?" "I understand now," I said. My voice did not shake. "You have made your point, Darius. We will settle this tomorrow morning. I am going to bed." A slow, arrogant smile spread across his face. He looked at Ashley and winked. Ashley smirked at me triumphantly. "See, she just needed a little push," she said. "Good night, Mom." Darius said, his voice dripping with false sweetness, "We can go to the notary after breakfast." They laughed as they headed upstairs to the master bedroom they had claimed for themselves, leaving me standing in the dark dining room. They went to sleep thinking they had won. They thought my silence was fear. They forgot that before the hurricane hits, the water always goes calm. I waited until I heard their door shut. Then I bent down and picked up the pieces of my broken glasses. I held the shattered lens in my palm, and I made a promise to the house that had sheltered my family for 4 decades. They would leave this house, but they would not be walking out the front door. They would be dragged out. I walked into my study and locked the door. It was going to be a long night. 3 in the morning is a dangerous time. It is the hour when the house settles into its bones and the truth comes out to breathe. I sat in my high back leather chair, the door to my study double-locked behind me. My shoulder throbbed a dull rhythmic ache where my son had shoved me against the wall. I reached up and touched the tender skin of my cheekbone. It was warm and swollen. In my 30 years as a senior auditor for the Internal Revenue Service, I had learned to read people better than I read balance sheets. I spent 3 decades hunting down the most sophisticated tax cheats in Chicago. I tracked money through shell companies, offshore accounts, and fake charities. I stared down CEOs who thought they could intimidate me, and mobsters who thought they could bribe me. I knew a red flag when I saw one. A missing receipt is a mistake. A pattern of missing receipts is fraud. But a son raising a hand to his mother, that is not just a red flag. That is a declaration of war. Darius and Ashley thought they were dealing with a retired grandmother who spent her days knitting and watching soap operas. They saw the gray hair and the slow walk. They forgot that I was the woman who brought down the blackened Outlook syndicate in '94. They forgot that my mind was a steel trap that never rusted. I stood up and walked to the large oil painting of the Mississippi Delta that hung behind my desk. I swung the frame aside, revealing the wall safe I had installed 20 years ago. My fingers did not shake as I spun the dial left, then right, then left again. I knew the combination by heart. It was the date I won my first major audit case. The heavy steel door clicked open. It was not filled with cash or jewelry. I am not a foolish woman. I keep my money in diversified portfolios, not in a wall. No, this safe held my true valuables, my tools of the trade. I reached in and pulled out a small black leather notebook. The pages were filled with observations, dates, and discrepancies I had noticed since Ashley moved into my home. Next, I took out a high-fidelity digital voice recorder, the kind that can pick up a whisper from across a room. Finally, I took out a magnifying glass with a heavy brass handle. It was old-fashioned, but it reminded me to look closer to see what others missed. I set them on the desk in a neat row. Then I powered on the computer monitor in the corner. The screen flickered to life, showing a grainy black and white feed. 3 months ago, when my bank statements started looking peculiar, I had installed hidden cameras in the common areas. I never told Darius. I never told anyone. On the screen, I saw the master bedroom. My bedroom. The one they had forced me out of. Darius was sprawled on his back, snoring with his mouth open. Ashley was curled up next to him, clutching a pillow. They looked so peaceful, so innocent. They were sleeping soundly in the bed of the woman they planned to rob, believing they had won. I leaned closer to the screen, watching their chests rise and fall. A cold, hard resolve settled in my stomach, replacing the fear. They thought I was weak. They thought I was broken. They had no idea who they were living with. "You have made a terrible mistake," I whispered to the empty room, my voice low and steady. "You think you defeated a mother, but you just woke up the auditor, and you have no idea the monster you have unleashed." I opened the black notebook to a fresh page. I picked up my pen. It was time to start the audit. It began 90 days ago on a rainy Tuesday. Darius stood on my porch, rain dripping from the brim of his hat, looking like a lost boy. He told me their apartment complex had a severe mold problem, and the landlord was forcing everyone out for remediation. He said they needed a place to stay for just a few weeks until the repairs were done. I looked past him to the car where Jordan was sitting in the back seat, his face pressed against the glass, looking small and forgotten. For the sake of my grandson, I opened the door. I did not know I was opening the gates to a Trojan horse. The invasion was not sudden or violent at first. It was a slow, creeping rot that started with the small things. For 40 years, the hallway leading to the living room had been lined with sepia-toned photographs of my ancestors. There was my great-grandmother, who was born into slavery but died a free landowner. There was my father standing proud in his World War II uniform. One afternoon, I came home from the grocery store to find the walls bare. The history of my family had been erased. In their place hung generic abstract art prints, the kind you buy in bulk at a discount home goods store. When I asked Ashley where my family went, she just shrugged and flipped her hair over her shoulder. "Oh, those old things," she said, her voice light and dismissive. "They were so dusty, Evie, and frankly they made the hallway feel dark and gloomy. We wanted to brighten the place up, make it look more modern. She called my history gloom. She called my heritage clutter. I found the photos later stuffed in a garbage bag in the garage. I rescued them and hid them under my bed, but the insult burned in my chest like a coal. Then came the war in the kitchen. I cook the way my mother taught me. I cook with butter and spice and history. I was making a pot of gumbo one evening, the dark roux bubbling on the stove, filling the house with the rich scent of bay leaves and thyme. Ashley walked into the kitchen, wrinkling her nose as if she had smelled sewage. "God, Evie," she said, fanning the air in front of her face. "That smell is so heavy and greasy, it sticks to my hair and my clothes. Can you not make something lighter, something more civilized? Maybe just a salad or some grilled chicken." She treated me like the help in my own home. She would leave her dirty dishes in the sink, expecting me to wash them. She would drop her coat on the floor, expecting me to pick it up. She walked through my brownstone with the entitlement of an owner and looked at me with the pity one reserves for a senile old relative. But the moment I knew this was not just disrespect, but danger, was the day the mail arrived. I am a creature of habit. The postman comes at 11 o'clock. I collect the mail at 11:15. One Tuesday, I found the envelope from my bank sitting on the hall table. It looked normal to the untrained eye, but I spent 30 years looking for tampering. The flap had been steamed open and carefully resealed. The glue was slightly uneven. There was a microscopic tear in the corner. Someone had looked at my balances. Someone was counting my money. I did not confront them. I did not scream. That very afternoon, I went to the public library and logged into my accounts. I switched every single statement to electronic delivery only. I changed every password to a complex alphanumeric string that no one could guess. I set up 2-factor authentication on my burner phone. If they wanted to play games with my finances, they would find that the bank vault was closed. I went back home and smiled at them over dinner, but behind my smile I was no longer a mother. I was an investigator, and the investigation had just begun. The poison did not just infect the house, it infected my son. Darius had always been soft. He was a gentle boy who preferred reading to sports, who cried when he saw a dead bird. But he had been kind. He had been loving. Ashley twisted that softness until it became something weak and pliable, something she could mold into a weapon. I would hear them at night through the thin walls. Ashley's voice was a low, constant hum, like a mosquito buzzing in your ear. "She is losing it, Darius," she would whisper. "Did you see her today? She forgot where she put her keys. She is getting senile. We need to take control before she does something stupid with the money." Darius would murmur something in protest at first. "Mom is fine, Ashley. She is just getting older." But Ashley would persist. "She is selfish, Darius. Look at this huge house. Just one old woman rattling around in all these empty rooms while we are struggling, while your son is sleeping on a couch. It is not fair. It is your inheritance anyway. Why should we wait until she is dead to have a life? Why does she get to hoard everything while we suffer?" Day by day, she chipped away at his conscience. She isolated him. When I tried to talk to him about his job search, Ashley would intervene. "Do not pressure him, Evie. He is doing his best." When I tried to reminisce about his father, Ashley would roll her eyes and pull him away. "Stop living in the past, Mom. Darius needs to focus on his future." She built a wall around him brick by brick until he could only see the world through her eyes. And in her world, I was not his mother. I was an obstacle. I was a bank account with a pulse. But the cruelest thing was what she did to Jordan. My grandson was a quiet, brilliant boy who loved coding and graphic novels. But in Ashley's regime, he was treated like a burden. One evening I came downstairs to find Jordan eating cold leftovers standing up in the kitchen, while Darius and Ashley sat at the dining table eating a fresh steak dinner. "Why is Jordan not eating with you?" I asked, my voice sharp. Ashley did not even look up from her plate. "He was disrespectful earlier," she said, cutting a piece of meat. "He needs to learn discipline. He can eat when he learns how to behave." "Disrespectful," I said. "He is 14 years old. He is a child. And he is sleeping on a lumpy sofa in the living room while you two sleep in a king-sized bed. Is that discipline too? You are spoiling him, Evie Ashley snapped. That is the problem with your generation. You coddle everyone. Stay out of it. This is parenting. I looked at Darius, expecting him to defend his son, expecting him to be the father I raised him to be, but he just looked down at his plate and kept eating. Listen to Ashley, Mom, he mumbled. She knows what is best. That was the moment my heart broke, not because they were cruel to me, but because my son looked at his own hungry child and chose his wife approval over his son welfare. Darius was not just weak anymore, he was complicit. He had traded his soul for her affection, and I realized then that I could not save him. I could only save myself and the boy he had abandoned. The clock on the wall ticked past 3:15 in the morning. My hands were steady as I opened my laptop. I did not need to be a hacker to find the truth. I spent 30 years tracking money trails for the government, and people leave footprints everywhere if you know where to look. I typed in Darius' social security number. I birthed him, so I knew the digits by heart. I paid a small fee to access a comprehensive credit database, the kind landlords and loan officers use. The report that loaded on my screen was a sea of red ink. It was not the financial profile of an investor. It was a disaster. His credit score was in the double digits. Every credit card he owned was maxed out. There were cash advances taken at 3 in the morning from ATMs near the riverboat casinos. Online betting sites appeared on his transaction history like a rash. My son was not a crypto visionary. He was a degenerate gambler chasing a losing streak that had already swallowed him whole. But gambling debt alone does not make a man assault his mother in her own kitchen. Desperation does. Terror does. I needed to find the source of the fear. I logged into the public court records database. Nothing criminal appeared yet, but then I checked the employment verification systems. His status at Harrison Logistics was listed clearly. Terminated for cause. Terminated for cause. In the corporate world, that is polite code for, we caught you stealing, but we are firing you quietly to avoid a scandal. I needed proof. I remembered a thick envelope I had seen in the trash 2 days ago. Ashley threw everything away without looking, but I had retrieved it and tucked it into my desk drawer. I pulled it out now. The return address was a high-powered law firm downtown. I sliced it open with my brass letter opener. Inside was a formal demand letter. I read the legal jargon and my blood ran cold. It outlined a systematic embezzlement scheme. Over the last 18 months, Darius had diverted vendor payments into a shell account. The total amount stolen was exactly $150,000. The letter was dated 3 days ago. The terms were brutal and clear. Restitute the full amount within 48 hours, or the company would file criminal charges and hand the evidence over to the district attorney. I lowered the paper to my desk. The room seemed to tilt. The puzzle pieces slammed together with a sickening thud. The sudden urgency, the demand for a second mortgage, the violence at the dinner table. Darius did not want to buy a new house. He was trying to buy his freedom. He needed my equity to pay back the money he stole before the clock ran out. He was willing to sell my home, my security, and his son's inheritance just to keep himself out of prison. I looked at the date on the letter. The deadline was tomorrow at noon. If he did not have the money by lunchtime, he was a felon. That was why he hit me. He was a cornered animal, and I knew exactly how to handle criminals. I folded the letter and placed it on top of my evidence pile. The boy I raised was gone. In his place was a thief. I picked up my phone. It was late, but I knew the CEO of Harrison Logistics. We had worked on an audit together 10 years ago. He was the kind of man who answered his phone when money was missing. It was time to make a deal. I left the sanctuary of my study and stepped into the hallway. The house was silent, save for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock and the distant hum of the refrigerator. I moved like a ghost in my own home, knowing exactly which floorboards would betray me with a squeak. I made my way to the living room, where Ashley had carelessly tossed her designer handbag onto the sofa earlier that evening. It was a Birkin knockoff, likely purchased with money that did not belong to her. She was so arrogant, so sure of her dominance in my house that she did not even bother to hide her secrets. My hands did not tremble. I reached inside the bag. It was a chaotic mess of receipts, lipstick tubes, and crumpled tissues. I pulled out her wallet. It was thick, bloated with plastic. I flipped it open. The first card looked normal enough, issued to Ashley Miller. But behind it was another card. This one was issued to a Sarah Jenkins. I pulled out a third, Margaret O'Connell. A fourth, David Chen. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my mind went cold and clinical. This was not just a shopping addiction. This was systematic identity theft. She was carrying a pocket full of stolen lives. She was not just a manipulator, she was a predator who feasted on the financial ruin of strangers. I dug deeper into the zippered lining of the bag, feeling for anything else. My fingers brushed against hard plastic. I pulled out a small amber prescription bottle. The label had been meticulously scraped off, leaving only sticky white residue. I shook it gently. Inside rattled a dozen small white pills. They looked innocent enough, but in my line of work, innocence is usually a disguise. I uncapped the bottle and tipped one onto my palm. No markings. No imprint codes. Just smooth, chalky white powder pressed into a tablet. I pulled out my phone and snapped a high-resolution photo of the pill against the dark leather of the sofa for contrast. I opened my contacts and scrolled to Marcus. He was a retired forensic toxicologist who used to work with the district attorney office. We had collaborated on cases involving money laundering through pharmaceutical shell companies. He owed me a favor. I sent the picture with a simple text. Need an ID on this immediately. It is urgent. I put the bottle back exactly as I found it. I returned the wallet to its specific angle, ensuring the zipper was closed just so. I stood up and looked at the stairs leading to where she slept. For months, I had thought I was dealing with a disrespectful daughter-in-law. I thought she was just a gold digger with bad manners and a taste for cruelty. I was wrong. I was dealing with a professional criminal. A woman who stole names and carried mystery pills in her purse. A woman who had likely done this before and left a trail of destruction in her wake. The fear in my chest evaporated, replaced by the icy calm of an executioner. She was not family. She was a target. You chose the wrong victim, Ashley, I thought as I slipped back toward the shadows of my study. You thought I was prey, but you just walked into the lion den. The phone in my pocket vibrated. It was Marcus. I looked at the screen and the blood in my veins turned to ice. The game had just changed from fraud to something much darker. I was about to lock the study door when a floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around, my hand instinctively reaching for the heavy brass lamp on the desk. But it was not Darius coming to finish what he started. It was Jordan. My 14-year-old grandson stood in the doorway, illuminated only by the moonlight filtering through the blinds. He was wearing an oversized t-shirt and he looked terrified. His hands were shaking, but his jaw was set with a determination that reminded me of his grandfather. "Grandma," he whispered, stepping into the room, "you need to see this." He held out an iPad. The screen was cracked, a spider web of glass fracturing the display. It was Darius' old tablet, the one he had discarded when Ashley demanded the newest model. "I thought he wiped this," I said, taking it from him. "He tried." Jordan said, his voice barely above a breath. "But he is lazy, Grandma. He just deleted the apps. He did not clear the cloud backup. I restored it, and I found the hidden folder." He tapped the screen and opened a messaging app. The conversation was between Ashley and a contact listed only as the Fixer. I put on my backup pair of reading glasses, the ones I kept in the desk drawer, and began to read. The timestamps were from yesterday afternoon, just hours before the dinner table assault. Ashley. "The old hag is being stubborn. She won't sign the loan." The Fixer saw. "You know the timeline. We need the liquid cash by Friday or the Paris deal falls through. Ashley. Don't worry. If she doesn't sign, we go to Plan B. I have the medical power of attorney paperwork drafted. We claim dementia. We put her in a state facility, the cheapest one we can find, one with a high mortality rate, the Fixer, and the house Ashley. We sell it immediately. The equity is huge. It covers the embezzlement debt and leaves us enough to move to France. We will be drinking wine by the Seine while she is rotting in a bed." I read the words twice, then a third time. My blood did not run cold, it boiled. They were not just planning to steal my money, they were planning to steal my life. They were going to declare me incompetent, lock me away in a warehouse for the dying, and use the home I built to fund a European vacation. It was premeditated, it was evil, and it was all right there in black and white glowing on a cracked screen. I looked up at Jordan. He was crying, silent tears streaming down his face. "I heard them talking, Grandma," he choked out. They said I would go to foster care. They said they couldn't take me to Paris. They said I was baggage. The rage that surged through me was unlike anything I had ever felt in my life. It was not the cold professional anger of an auditor. It was the primal fury of a matriarch. They had hurt me, and I had stayed calm, but they threatened to throw my grandson away like garbage, and that was a line they could never uncross. I dropped to my knees, regardless of my bad joints, and pulled Jordan into my arms. He buried his face in my shoulder and sobbed the way a child does when they have been holding on to fear for too long. I held him tight, feeling his skinny frame shake against me. "Listen to me, Jordan," I said, my voice fierce and low against his ear. "Look at me." He pulled back, wiping his eyes. "No one is going to foster care. No one is going to Paris. And no one is ever going to hurt you again. Do you hear me?" He nodded, sniffing. "You did good, baby. You did so good. Now I need you to be brave for just a few more hours. Can you do that?" "Yes, Grandma." I stood up and helped him to his feet. "Go back to the sofa. Pretend you are asleep. When the sun comes up, everything changes." I watched him creep back into the shadows. I turned back to my desk and looked at the iPad. I added it to the pile of evidence next to the pill bottle and the credit report. I had enough to put them in prison for a decade, but prison was too good for them. I wanted them to feel the hope rise in their chests, only to have it crushed. I wanted to serve them their own arrogance on a silver platter. I looked at the clock. 4:30. It was time to start cooking breakfast. 5 o'clock in the morning is when the baker starts the bread and the executioner sharpens the axe. I stood in my kitchen apron tied tight around my waist, moving with the muscle memory of 40 years of motherhood. I pulled the heavy cast-iron skillet from the bottom shelf. It hit the burner with a dull thud. I was not just making breakfast. I was setting a trap baited with butter and nostalgia. I started with the bacon. Thick-cut hickory smoked strips that sizzled and popped as they hit the hot metal. The smell wafted up, rich and salty, drifting through the vents and creeping under the bedroom doors upstairs. It was the smell of Sunday mornings. It was the smell of safety. It was the olfactory signal that said, "Mama is in the kitchen and everything is forgiven." Next came the biscuits. I did not use the stuff from a can. I used the recipe my grandmother taught me, cold butter cut into flour by hand until it looked like coarse crumbs. I rolled out the dough and cut perfect circles, placing them on the baking sheet. Into the oven they went, rising into golden fluffy clouds of deception. I whisked a dozen eggs, adding a splash of heavy cream to make them rich. I started a pot of grits, stirring them slowly until they were creamy and thick, just the way Darius liked them. While my hands worked the food, my voice worked the phone. I had my burner phone tucked between my shoulder and ear. The contrast between my actions and my words would have terrified a lesser woman. "Mr. Harrison," I said, flipping a sausage patty, "I apologize for the early hour, but if you want your $150,000 back, you need to be at my front door at 8:30 sharp. Do not knock. Just wait." I hung up and dialed again. My hand never stopped stirring the grits. "Sheriff Marcus, it is Evelyn. I have a situation involving elder abuse and grand larceny. I have the evidence packaged and ready. I need you here at 8:30. Bring handcuffs. 2 pairs. I cracked another egg. "Mr. Green, bring the eviction notice and the custody petition. We are executing them today, 8:30. 8 fall. Do not be late." I hung up the phone and placed it on the counter. The kitchen was now a symphony of aromas, coffee brewing dark and strong, sausage browning in the pan, biscuits turning golden in the heat. It smelled like love. It smelled like a home where nothing bad could ever happen. Upstairs I heard the floorboards creak. The smell had done its work. The rats were waking up drawn by the scent of the cheese. They would come down expecting a defeated old woman trying to buy back their affection with a hot meal. They would see the spread on the table and think they had won. They would eat my food and drink my coffee and smile their smug little smiles. And then the doorbell would ring. I arranged the platter of bacon with the precision of a surgeon. I placed the biscuits in a basket lined with a linen napkin. I set the table with my good china, the plates I usually saved for Thanksgiving. I wanted this to be perfect. I wanted them to be full and happy and comfortable, because the fall is always harder when you are standing on a rug that is about to be pulled out from under you. At 7 o'clock, the scent of frying bacon reached the master bedroom. Darius stretched in the king-sized bed, rolling over to find Ashley already awake and scrolling through her phone. She looked at him and smiled a slow, predatory grin that did not quite reach her eyes. "Do you smell that?" she asked, inhaling deeply. "It smells like victory." Darius laughed, sitting up and rubbing his face. He felt good, better than good. For the first time in months, the crushing weight of his debt felt manageable. The fear that had been gnawing at his gut was replaced by a giddy sense of relief. He had done it. He had stared down his mother and she had blinked. "I told you she would fold," he said, swinging his legs out of bed. "She just needed a reminder of who is in charge now. You were right, babe. We should have been firmer with her months ago." Ashley sat up and kissed his cheek. "See, honey, sometimes you just have to show people you mean business. With old people especially. They get stubborn. They get confused. Sometimes you have to shake them up a little bit to make them see reason. It is for her own good, really. We are going to manage that money so much better than she ever could." Darius stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street. He imagined his new life. No more debt, no more looking over his shoulder. And Paris. He had never been to Paris. "We are going to be rich," he whispered. "Once that loan clears, I am paying off the Harrison thing, and then we are gone. I saw a listing for a vintage Porsche yesterday. Black convertible. I think I am going to buy it cash." Ashley laughed, getting out of bed and wrapping herself in a silk robe. "Don't spend it all before we sign the papers." "But yes, a Porsche sounds nice. And I need a new wardrobe for France. I can't be seen in Paris wearing last season's trends." They got dressed with the leisurely pace of people who have nowhere to be but the bank. Darius put on his best suit. Ashley spent 30 minutes on her makeup. They wanted to look the part. The successful son and his elegant wife graciously accepting the torch from the matriarch. As they walked down the stairs, they exchanged conspiratorial glances. They could hear me in the kitchen, the clink of silverware, the sizzle of the pan. It sounded normal. It sounded submissive. "Just remember," Ashley whispered as they reached the landing. "Be nice. Let her save face. Let her think she is being generous. We get the signature, then we get the hell out of here." Darius nodded, adjusting his tie. "Leave it to me. I know how to handle her. She is my mother after all. She loves me. She just needed a little push to remember that helping me is her job." They walked into the dining room, heads held high, expecting to find a broken woman waiting to serve them. What they found was a table set for royalty, and a woman standing at the stove who looked anything but broken. But in their arrogance, they did not see the steel in my spine. They only saw the biscuits. They walked into the kitchen and stopped dead in their tracks. The dining table, which had been the scene of a crime just 12 hours earlier, was now transformed into a cornucopia of Southern comfort. Platters of crispy bacon sat next to mountains of fluffy scrambled eggs. The biscuits were piled high in a wicker basket steaming under a linen cloth. A pitcher of fresh orange juice sweat condensation onto the lace tablecloth. And standing at the head of it all was me wearing my Sunday best apron and a smile that did not quite reach my eyes. "Good morning," I said, my voice as sweet as molasses. "I hope you two slept well." Darius looked at the feast, then back at me. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was trying to reconcile the woman he had assaulted last night with the woman serving him breakfast this morning. He decided to believe the lie because it was easier. He decided I had broken. He decided he had won. He walked over and kissed my cheek. I had to force myself not to flinch. "Mom," he said, putting on his best contrite face. "Look about last night. I was a little hot-headed. I am sorry. The stress of this investment has just got me on edge. You know how it is." He paused, looking at the empty spot on the sideboard where I usually kept my mail. "So did you sign the papers yet?" I turned back to the stove to flip a sausage patty so he would not see the disgust in my eyes. "Hush now, baby," I said. "Do not worry about business on an empty stomach. Sit down. Eat. Eat your fill." I called the notary. "He is scheduled to be here at 8:30 sharp. Everything is ready." Darius pumped his fist quietly. "Yes. Okay, great. Thanks, Mom. You are making the right choice. You really are. This is going to change everything for us." He sat down and began piling food onto his plate like a man who had not eaten in weeks. Ashley sauntered in behind him, smoothing her silk robe. She looked at the table with a smirk of pure triumph. She sat down next to Darius, not even bothering to say good morning. She looked at me with the smug satisfaction of a queen surveying her conquered lands. I walked over to her with the pot of grits. I ladled a generous serving onto her plate right next to the eggs. "Eat up, Ashley," I said, my voice low and maternal. "You need to eat plenty. You are going to need your strength for the journey ahead." She looked up at me, her eyes sparkling with greed. She thought I meant the journey to Paris. She thought I meant the long flight to her new life of luxury. She had no idea I was talking about the bus ride to the county lockup. "Oh, thanks, Evie," she said, picking up her fork. "We do have a lot of planning to do. It is going to be a busy few weeks." I poured coffee into their mugs, watching the dark liquid swirl. "Yes, indeed," I said. "Very busy." Jordan came into the room then. He walked quietly, his eyes downcast, just as we had practiced. He sat at the far end of the table, away from them. Darius did not even look at him. He was too busy stuffing his face with bacon, oblivious to the fact that he was eating his last meal as a free man. I took my seat at the head of the table and folded my hands. I did not eat. I just watched them feed. It was fascinating in a morbid sort of way to see how confident ignorance could be. As the biscuits disappeared and the coffee pot grew light, Ashley's courage expanded like a balloon filling with toxic gas. It is truly amazing how quickly a guest becomes a tyrant when they believe they hold the deed. She wiped her mouth with a linen napkin my great-grandmother had embroidered and looked around the dining room, not with appreciation, but with calculation. Her eyes darted from the crown molding to the crystal chandelier, assessing value rather than beauty. "You know, Evie," she said, gesturing casually with her fork, "once the paperwork is filed today, we really need to discuss the living arrangements. I have been thinking about it, and those stairs are getting to be too much for you. It is a safety hazard, really. I think it would be best if you moved into the small guest room off the kitchen. It is cozy and much more practical for someone your age." I sipped my coffee, letting the steam hide my expression. She was talking about the maid room, a room barely big enough for a twin bed. She wanted to put me in a box while she took over the kingdom. Plus, she continued, oblivious to the tension thickening the air. "Darius and I have big plans for the master suite. We are thinking of knocking down the wall to the adjoining nursery to make a walk-in closet. I simply cannot fit my wardrobe in that current space. It is dreadfully outdated." She was talking about destroying my home while eating my food. She was talking about erasing the room where I nursed my son just to build a shrine to her vanity. Across the table, Jordan went rigid. His knuckles turned white as he gripped his fork so hard I thought it might bend. He looked like he was about to launch himself across the table and scream the truth at them. Under the lace tablecloth, I extended my leg and gently tapped his foot. Once. Firmly. "Wait," the tap said. "Hold the line." He looked at me, his eyes burning with teenage fury, and slowly exhaled. He took a bite of eggs, but I knew it tasted like ash in his mouth. He looked down at his plate, trembling with the effort of silence. Darius did not even notice his wife cruelty or his son rage. He checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. He was vibrating with a nervous energy that he tried to pass off as excitement, but I recognized as panic. He was sweating despite the cool morning air. "Mom, where is this notary?" he asked, tapping his phone against the mahogany table. "You said 8:30. It is 8:25. I need to get to the bank as soon as the funds clear. I have investments pending that require immediate attention." Investments. He meant he had a shark breathing down his neck waiting to break his legs if he did not pay up by noon. He meant he needed to cover his theft before the auditors arrived. I looked at him. My son, who was willing to displace his mother and erase his history for a quick payout. Patience. Darius, I said, pouring him more coffee with a steady hand. He will be here. These things have to be done correctly. We do not want any mistakes, do we? Ashley laughed, a high tinkling sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. Oh, do not worry, Evie. We have double-checked everything. There won't be any mistakes. She was right, of course. I had double-checked everything too, including the response time of the sheriff department. And right on cue as she reached for another biscuit, the heavy sound of a car door slamming echoed from the street, followed by another. The cavalry had arrived. At 8:30, exactly the doorbell rang. It was not a tentative, polite chime. It was a firm, authoritative press that echoed through the high ceilings of the entryway. The sound cut through the tense atmosphere of the dining room like a knife. Darius practically leaped out of his chair. He tossed his napkin onto his plate with a flourish of triumph. "That is him," he announced, a wide grin splitting his face. He looked at Ashley and winked. "Finally. This is it, babe. Freedom is knocking." He strode toward the front door with the swagger of a man who believes he has just won the lottery. I stayed in my seat sipping my coffee, calm as a graveyard. I watched Ashley adjust her silk robe and smooth her hair, preparing to greet the notary with her best charming hostess smile. She looked at me, expecting to see defeat. What she saw was a woman who had already turned the page. "I will get it, Mom," Darius called out from the hallway, his voice booming with confidence. "Just have your pen ready. We are going to make this quick." I heard the heavy oak door creak open. I heard Darius' voice start to say, "Good morning, come on in." And then I heard the silence. It was a sudden, suffocating silence, the kind that happens when a man opens a door expecting a lamb and finds a pack of wolves. Ashley frowned. "Darius," she called out, "is everything okay?" Darius did not answer. He was backing into the dining room, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender, his face drained of all color. He looked like he had seen a ghost. But it was not a ghost. It was much worse. 3 men walked into my dining room. They were not smiling. The first man was broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive charcoal suit that cost more than Darius' car. His face was hard, his eyes cold. It was Mr. Harrison, the CEO of Harrison Logistics. The man Darius had stolen from. The man Darius was terrified of. The second man was in uniform, his badge gleaming under the chandelier, his hand resting casually near his holster. It was Sheriff Marcus, my old friend in the law in this county. The third man brought up the rear, carrying a leather briefcase, not unlike the one Darius thought the notary would have. But this was Mr. Green, my attorney, and the papers he carried were not loan applications. Darius stumbled backward until his legs hit the edge of the dining table. He looked at Mr. Harrison, then at me, then back at the door, as if checking if he could run. He was hyperventilating. "Mr. Harrison," he squeaked, his voice cracking like a teenager. "Sir, I thought, what are you doing here?" Mr. Harrison did not look at Darius. He looked at me. He nodded respectfully. "Mrs. Washington, thank you for the call. We are right on time." Ashley stood up, her face a mask of confusion and growing fear. "Who are these people, Darius? What is going on?" I set my coffee cup down on the saucer with a gentle clink. "Sit down, Ashley," I said, my voice slicing through the room. "We have guests, and they did not come for the biscuits." Mr. Harrison stepped forward and threw a thick file onto the table. It landed right next to the plate of scrambled eggs, scattering crumbs. It was not a small thud. It was the heavy sound of a career ending. "Darius Washington," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You have some explaining to do, and I suggest you start talking fast because the sheriff here has a very tight schedule." Darius looked at me, his eyes wide and pleading. Mom, what did you do?" I did not blink. "I did what I had to do, son. I audited you." The room seemed to shrink as the 3 men stepped fully into the light of the chandelier. They sucked the oxygen right out of the air, leaving Darius and Ashley gasping like fish on a dock. There is a specific kind of silence that falls when authority walks into a room. It is heavy, it is absolute, and it is terrifying if you are on the wrong side of it. Mr. Harrison stood at the front. He was a man who wore power like a second skin. I had audited his company years ago, and I knew him to be fair but ruthless. He built his logistics empire from one truck to a fleet of thousands. He did not tolerate fools, and he certainly did not tolerate thieves. He looked at Darius with a mixture of disappointment and cold fury. He did not look like a former boss. He looked like a man who had been betrayed and was here to collect a debt in blood or cash. To his right stood Sheriff Marcus. We went to high school together 50 years ago. He had been the captain of the football team, and I was the head of the debate club. We had a mutual respect that spanned decades. He stood with his thumbs hooked in his belt, his badge catching the morning light. He was not smiling. He looked at me and gave a barely perceptible nod, a silent confirmation that he was here to back my play. He looked at Ashley and his eyes narrowed. He had seen women like her before, women who mistake kindness for weakness. He was not impressed. To the left was Mr. Green. He was my personal attorney, a man with a mind like a razor blade and a heart made of contract law. He held his briefcase with both hands, his knuckles white. He looked at the scene before him, the uneaten biscuits, the cooling eggs, the trembling sun, and he looked almost bored. To him, this was not a family tragedy. It was a transaction, and he was here to close the deal. Darius was shaking so hard his coffee cup rattled against the saucer. He tried to stand up, but his legs would not cooperate. He slumped back into his chair, a puppet whose strings had been cut. "Who?" Ashley whispered, her voice trembling. "Who are these people, Evie?" I did not look at her. I lifted my teacup to my lips and took a slow, deliberate sip. The tea was hot and strong, just the way I like it. I set the cup down carefully, making sure it made no sound against the china saucer. I smoothed the napkin on my lap. I looked at my son, who was sweating through his expensive suit. I looked at his wife, who was realizing that her charm had no currency here. "Darius Ashley." I said, my voice calm and steady, the voice of a woman who is done being a victim. "I told you we would solve our financial issues this morning. I am a woman of my word." I gestured to the three men standing like sentinels in my dining room. "Allow me to introduce the cleanup crew." I pointed a steady finger at the man in the charcoal suit. "Darius, you remember Mr. Harrison, do you not? I believe you have something of his. About $150,000 worth of something." Darius made a sound like a wounded animal. "And this," I continued, gesturing to the uniform, "is Sheriff Marcus. He is here because in this county we do not take kindly to men who put their hands on their mothers." Ashley gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. And finally, I said, nodding to the man with the briefcase, "This is Mr. Green. He is here to ensure that when you two leave my house today, you leave with nothing but the clothes on your backs and the consequences of your actions." I folded my hands on the table and smiled. It was a cold smile, a final smile. "Gentlemen," I said, "please proceed. Breakfast is over." Mr. Harrison stepped forward, and the floorboards groaned under his weight. He held the thick manila folder in his hand like a weapon. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed it onto the dining table. It landed with a dull thud right next to Darius' plate of cooling scrambled eggs, sending a cloud of biscuit crumbs scattering across the mahogany. Darius flinched as if he had been struck. He stared at the folder, his name printed on the label in bold black letters. He knew what was inside. It was the accounting of his sins. It was the paper trail of every dollar he had siphoned from the company accounts to pay for his gambling and his wife's expensive tastes. "You thought you were clever, Darius," Mr. Harrison said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "You thought because you were in accounts payable, you could hide the transfers. You thought shell companies and fake invoices would cover your tracks." He leaned down, placing his knuckles on the table and leaning into Darius' face. "But you forgot who raised you, son. You forgot that your mother spent 30 years catching men twice as smart as you." Darius looked up, his eyes darting from Harrison to me. "What are you talking about?" "Your mother sent me an email at 3 o'clock this morning." Mr. Harrison continued, straightening up. "It contained a complete audit of your activities, every stolen dime, every fraudulent transfer, $150,000. She did my forensic accountant's job for them. And she did it in one night." Ashley let out a small, strangled sound. Darius looked at me, his face crumbling. "Mom," he whispered, "you sent him the proof." "I did," Mr. Harrison said, answering for me. "And she also proposed a settlement, a way to keep this out of the criminal courts for now." Darius' eyes lit up with a flicker of hope. "A settlement? You mean the house loan?" Mr. Harrison laughed, a harsh barking sound. "No, Darius, we are not touching your mother house. That property belongs to her. The settlement involves the liquidation of your assets." "My assets?" Darius stammered. "Your car," Mr. Harrison listed, ticking them off on his fingers. "That vintage Porsche you were bragging about buying. Your 401k, your personal savings. And Mrs. Washington tells me there is quite a collection of designer handbags and jewelry upstairs that should fetch a fair price on the resale market." Ashley shrieked, "No, you cannot take my things. Those are mine." "They were bought with stolen money," ma'am, Mr. Harrison said coldly. "That makes them evidence, unless you want to surrender them voluntarily." Darius looked at me. He was trembling so hard his teeth were chattering. Tears welled up in his eyes. "Mom," he choked out, "how could you? You sold me out. Your own son. You chose a company over me." I looked at him across the ruins of our breakfast. I saw the little boy who used to run to me with a scraped knee. But I also saw the man who had crushed my glasses under his boot. "No, Darius," I said, my voice steady and hard as iron. "I did not sell you out. I am teaching you the one lesson your father never got the chance to teach you before he passed." I leaned forward. "You do not steal labor, Darius. You do not steal the sweat from another man's brow, and you never ever bite the hand that feeds you. You wanted to be a big man with big money. Well, today you are going to pay the bill." Sheriff Marcus stepped forward, his heavy boots thudding against the hardwood floor. He did not look at the financial papers scattered across the table. He was not here for the money. He was here for the blood. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black remote control. I had given it to him when he walked in, a simple device that controlled the large flat-screen television Darius had insisted on mounting above the fireplace 3 weeks ago. He had bought it with my credit card, claiming the old one was too small. Now that expensive purchase was about to cost him everything. The screen flickered to life. The feed was not grainy. I had paid for the best 4K cameras available. The image was crystal clear, showing this very room bathed in the warm light of the chandelier. The timestamp in the corner read 8:15 p.m. the previous night. We all watched in silence. On the screen, the digital version of Darius stood up, his face twisted in rage. We heard his voice amplify through the surround sound speakers, shouting demands. We saw me stand up small and defiant, and then we saw the moment that ended his life as a free man. Darius lunged. The violence was shocking in high definition. The camera captured the spray of spittle from his mouth, the veins bulging in his neck. He shoved me. The sound of my body hitting the plaster wall echoed through the silent dining room, a sickening wet thud that made everyone flinch. Then came the crunch, the sharp, distinctive sound of my reading glasses shattering under his heavy boot. On the screen, Ashley laughed. At the table, the real Ashley turned the color of old milk, bringing a hand up to cover her mouth. Sheriff Marcus pressed a button, freezing the image on the frame where Darius stood over me, his fist clenched. He turned to face my son, his expression unreadable. In this state, Darius Marcus said, his voice a low rumble like approaching thunder assaulting a person over the age of 65, "is not a misdemeanor. It is a Class 2 felony, aggravated battery of a senior citizen." He took a slow step closer, his hand resting casually near his handcuffs. "And since you were demanding a signature on a financial document while you did it, that adds attempted extortion to the charge sheet. You are not looking at probation, son. You are looking at a mandatory minimum of 3 to 7 years in a state penitentiary. And that is before the federal prosecutors even look at the embezzlement file Mr. Harrison just dropped on the table." Darius looked from the frozen image of his own violence to the badge on Marcus' chest. The arrogance drained out of him like water from a cracked pitcher. His knees gave way, and he collapsed back into his chair so hard the wood groaned. He buried his face in his hands and began to sob. It was not a dignified cry. It was the messy, desperate wailing of a bully who has finally been punched back. "Mom, please." He choked out, snot running down his face. "I did not mean it. I was just stressed. You know I would never hurt you. I am your son. I am your baby. Please do not let them take me." I looked at the weeping man at my table. I searched for the little boy I used to walk to the bus stop, the one who brought me dandelions from the yard. But he was gone. In his place was a stranger who would push his mother into a wall for a crypto investment. "You are right, Darius," I said, my voice steady and cold. "You are my son, and that is why I have to do this. Because somewhere along the way, I failed to teach you that actions have consequences." I looked at Marcus and nodded. "You hurt me in my own home, Darius. You broke my glasses, you broke my heart, and now the law is going to break you." Ashley watched her husband collapse into a sobbing heap, and she did exactly what a parasite does when its host begins to die. She detached. She stood up abruptly, clutching her designer handbag to her chest, her eyes darting between the sheriff and the back door. The mask of the supportive wife vanished, replaced by the cold calculation of a survivor. "I am leaving," she announced, her voice shrill and tight. "I had nothing to do with any of this. I did not know he was stealing from his job. I did not know he hit you, Evie. I have been trying to get him to seek help for his gambling for months. He is a monster. He forced me to go along with everything." Darius stopped crying. He looked up at his wife, his eyes red and swollen. "Ashley," he whispered, "you planned it. It was your idea." "You are a liar," she screamed, pointing a manicured finger at him. "You are an abusive loser, and I am the victim here. Officer, I want to file a report. He threatened me." Sheriff Marcus did not move out of her path. He just crossed his arms and looked at me. I reached under the table and pulled out the cracked iPad Jordan had given me in the middle of the night. I tapped the screen, waking it up. "You can save your lies for the jury, Ashley," I said, "because unlike my son, I do not make accusations without proof." I pressed play on a voice memo Jordan had recovered from the deleted folder. Ashley's voice, tinny but unmistakable, filled the dining room. "If the old hag does not sign by Friday, we just slip it in her coffee. No one autopsies a 68-year-old woman who dies in her sleep. We take the house, we take the money, and we leave this dump." The recording ended. The silence in the room was deafening. Ashley's face went the color of ash. She opened her mouth to speak, to spin another web, but my phone buzzed on the table. It was the text message I had been waiting for from my friend at the forensics lab. I picked up the phone and read the message aloud, my voice shaking with a rage I could barely contain. "Analysis complete. The white pills found in the subject purse are not sedatives. They are arsenic trioxide, low dose, tasteless, odorless, and fatal over time." I looked up at her. "You were not going to put me in a home, Ashley. You were going to put me in the ground. You brought poison into my house. You were going to feed it to me at my own breakfast table." Ashley dropped her bag. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. Sheriff Marcus moved faster than a man his size should be able to. He spun Ashley around and slammed her against the wall, her face pressed against the floral wallpaper she had hated so much. The handcuffs clicked tight, biting into her wrists. "You have the right to remain silent," Marcus growled, "but I suggest you start praying instead." And that is when the mask fell off completely. Ashley did not cry. She did not beg. She exploded. She twisted in the sheriff's grip, her face contorted into a mask of pure, ugly hatred. "Get your hands off me," she shrieked. "You people are all the same. You think you are so special with your little family history and your soul food and your pride. It is a garbage house filled with garbage people. I deserve that money. I deserve it for having to live in this museum of dead people. I hate you. I hate all of you." She spat at me, a glob of saliva landing on the tablecloth near the biscuits. Sheriff Marcus hauled her toward the door, his grip iron tight. She was still screaming racial slurs and profanities as he dragged her out onto the porch. Her voice echoed down the street, a final testament to the rot that had been living in my guest room. I watched her go. I did not wipe the spit from the table. I wanted to remember exactly who she was. I wanted to remember that evil does not always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a pretty girl in a silk robe. The room was quiet now except for the sound of Darius sniffling. The violence of Ashley's departure hung in the air like smoke. Mr. Green stepped forward and opened his briefcase one last time. He pulled out a single crisp document and handed it to me. I walked over to where my son sat slumped in his chair. He looked up at me with eyes that were red and swollen and full of a pathetic kind of hope. "Mom," he croaked. "Mom, please. I can fix this. I will pay it back. Just tell them. Tell them it was a mistake." I placed the document in front of him. I pulled a pen from my apron pocket, the cheap plastic kind I used for grocery lists. "There is only one thing you are going to do today, Darius," I said, my voice flat. "You are going to sign this." He looked down at the paper, his brow furrowed as he tried to read through the tears. "What is this?" he asked. Is it the loan?" I almost laughed, a bitter sound that stayed stuck in my throat. "No, Darius. I am done lending you things. This is a voluntary relinquishment of parental rights and a transfer of full legal guardianship. You are giving Jordan to me." He recoiled as if the paper had burned him. "What? No, he is my son. You cannot take my son. You lost your son the moment you let your wife starve him," I snapped. "You lost him when you planned to rob his grandmother and leave him to the wolves. You are going into the system, Darius. You are going to prison. Do you want him to go to foster care? Do you want him to be a ward of the state? Or do you want him to be safe?" Darius looked over at Jordan, who was still sitting quietly at the end of the table. The boy did not look at his father. He was looking at his hands twisting the hem of his shirt. Darius looked back at me. Then he looked at Mr. Harrison and the sheriff. I could see the calculation in his eyes, the cowardice. He thought that if he did this one good thing, maybe we would go easy on him. Maybe I would tell the judge he cooperated. Even at the end, he was thinking about himself. "If I sign this," he whispered, will you help me?" I looked at him with pity. Not love, just pity. "Sign the paper, Darius." He picked up the pen. His hand shook so badly the signature was barely legible, but it was there. He pushed the paper back to me. I took it and handed it to Mr. Green, who notarized it on the spot with a satisfying stamp. It was done. Jordan was mine. He was safe. Sheriff Marcus stepped forward. "Stand up, Darius. It is time to go." He hauled my son out of the chair. Darius did not fight. He did not scream like his wife. He just wept. He let himself be handcuffed. He let himself be led to the door. At the threshold, he turned back one last time. "Mom," he sobbed, "I am sorry." I did not answer. I watched the door close behind him. I watched the flashing lights of the squad car reflect against the dining room walls. And then finally, they were gone. I turned to Jordan. The house was quiet, but for the first time in 3 months, it was peaceful. 6 months have passed since the morning of the biscuits and the handcuffs. The seasons turned from the crisp promise of autumn to the brutal cold of winter. But inside my brownstone, the air is finally warm again. The legal system moves slowly, but when it finally strikes, it strikes hard. Ashley's trial was a spectacle. She tried to charm the jury. She tried to cry on the stand. She played the victim until the very end, claiming she was coerced, claiming she was misunderstood. But you cannot charm your way out of a toxicology report. The arsenic was the final nail in her coffin. The judge was not swayed by her tears or her silk blouse. She received 8 years in a federal correctional facility for attempted murder and aggravated identity theft. I heard she is working in the laundry detail now. No designer bags, no trips to Paris, just gray walls and the consequences of her own greed. Darius took a plea deal, but it did not save him from the wrath of the sentencing guidelines. 5 years. 3 for the embezzlement and 2 consecutive years for the assault on an elderly person. He is currently incarcerated at the state penitentiary, a place far removed from the comfort of the master bedroom he tried to steal. I went to see him yesterday. It was the first time, and it will be the last. The visiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and despair. He looked thinner. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow, haunted look. He sat on the other side of the thick plexiglass, keeping his eyes on his hands. He looked like the little boy who broke a vase and was afraid to admit it, only now the vase was his entire life. "Mom," he whispered into the phone receiver, his voice cracking. "Get me out, please. I cannot do this. It is too hard. I made a mistake." I looked at him. I looked at the son I birthed, the son I raised, the son who raised a hand against me. I did not feel hate. Hate takes too much energy, and I am too old to waste energy on things that do not pay dividends. I felt a deep, profound sadness, but sadness does not mean weakness. I leaned forward, pressing my hand against the cold glass. My palm left a ghostly print on the surface. Darius looked at me. He looked up, tears streaming down his face, his eyes red and pleading. "I still love you, Darius," I said, my voice steady and quiet in the noisy room. "You are my flesh and blood. You are my son. But I love justice more, and I love peace more. You are where you belong right now." He started to sob, but I kept talking. "Use this time. Learn who you are without a woman telling you who to be. Learn how to be a man who builds instead of steals. Rehabilitate yourself, Darius, because no one else can do it for you." I hung up the phone before he could beg again. I stood up and walked out of that prison and into the winter sunlight. I did not look back. I had a grandson waiting for me at home, and he needed help with his algebra. It is Saturday morning, and the house finally smells like home again. The sharp chemical tang of fresh paint mixes with the sweet warm aroma of peach cobbler bubbling in the oven. I am standing in what used to be the master bedroom, the room my son and his wife stole from me. But it does not look like a stolen room anymore. The cold gray wallpaper Ashley insisted on is gone, stripped away, and thrown in the trash where it belongs. The walls are now a deep, rich navy blue. It is a strong color, a serious color. It is the color Jordan picked out for his new gaming and study room. "Pass me the roller," Grandma Jordan says from the top of the ladder. He is wearing one of my old oversized t-shirts covered in blue speckles. He is laughing. It is a sound I did not hear for 3 months, a sound I thought might have been extinguished forever. But here it is, bright and alive, bouncing off the freshly painted walls. We finished the painting by noon. Then came the most important part. I went to my room and pulled the heavy plastic bin from under my bed. I wiped the dust off the lid. Inside were the faces of my history. My great-grandmother, my father in his uniform, my mother in her Sunday hat. Ashley had thrown them in a garbage bag, but I had rescued them, and now we were putting them back where they belonged. Jordan held the hammer. I held the frames. One by one, we lined the hallway with our ancestors. As we hung them, I told Jordan their stories. I told him about the strength in his bloodline. I told him about the men and women who survived slavery and segregation and poverty so that he could stand here today in a paid-off house and dream about his future. He listened intently, tracing the glass with his paint-stained finger. He was not just learning history, he was learning who he was. After the work was done, we went down to the kitchen. The cobbler was ready, golden and bubbling. I dished out 2 bowls and poured 2 glasses of cold milk. We sat at the dining table, the same table where I had been assaulted, the same table where I had served justice. But the ghosts were gone now. The air was clear. I looked at my grandson, blowing on a spoonful of hot peaches. He looked up and smiled at me, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He looked so much like Darius used to look before the world twisted him. But Jordan was different. Jordan had seen the darkness and chosen the light. People always say that blood is thicker than water. They tell you that family is everything that you stick by your kin, no matter what. They are wrong. Sometimes blood gets infected. Sometimes the very limb that is supposed to support you becomes gangrenous. And when that happens, you do not let it spread to the heart. You cut it off. You endure the pain of the amputation so that the rest of the body can survive. I lost a son. That is a grief I will carry to my grave. There is a hole in my heart, shaped like Darius, and it will never be filled. But as I watched Jordan laugh at a joke I made, I realized something profound. I lost a son, but I saved a man. I saved this boy from a life of fear and neglect. I gave him a chance to be better than his father. "Eat up, baby," I said, smiling at him. "You need your strength. We have a lot of living left to do." He took a bite and closed his eyes, savoring the sweetness. "It is good, Grandma," he said. "It is really good." The most profound lesson from Evelyn's journey is that family is defined by respect and integrity, not just biology. We are often conditioned to believe that a mother's love must be an endless resource, forgiving every transgression, no matter how severe. However, Evelyn proves that enabling abuse is not love, it is destruction. When her son crossed the line into violence and theft, she realized that protecting her legacy and her innocent grandson required making the hardest choice a parent can face. She demonstrated that age is not synonymous with weakness, and silence is not submission. True strength often lies in the quiet, strategic dismantling of those who underestimate us. By cutting off the toxic influence of her son, she didn't destroy her family. She saved it. Her story serves as a powerful reminder that we teach people how to treat us. If we tolerate disrespect, we invite it. But if we demand dignity, even at the cost of severing ties with our own flesh and blood, we reclaim our peace. Justice is not revenge. It is necessary accountability for the sake of the future. If you believe Evelyn made the right choice to save her grandson, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about standing your ground.